Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Irma, the powerful Category 5 hurricane, is now on a path to make landfall in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. It has already brought record-setting winds, death, and destruction to parts of the Caribbean. People in the projected path of the monster storm are preparing for the worst. Gary Lane has the story.
Hurricane Irma barreled through the southern Caribbean on its way toward the U.S., packing 180-mile-per-hour sustained winds, bringing death and destruction to Barbuda and submerged streets to the island of St. Martin. Thomas Road Baptist Church pastor Jonathan Falwell surprised his wife with a wedding anniversary trip to St. Martin. They were trapped on the island when the hurricane hit. He posted photos of the destruction on social media and tweeted, "We are safe. No power, everything destroyed. Buildings gone. Please pray as this island is decimated." Heavy rain hammered Puerto Rico and caused power outages affecting 1 million people. More than 1,000 sought safety in shelters. Parts of the island could be without power for 4 to 6 months. In the Florida Keys, 25,000 people have already been evacuated. Mandatory evacuations took place in some Miami neighborhoods, and traffic jams on some evacuation routes were commonplace.
I've been through George, been through Andrew, been through Wilma, but I'm not staying for Irma.
Evacuees from the Florida and Georgia coasts are seeking refuge in hotel rooms in central Georgia. Most are sold out. Florida Governor Rick Scott warned people to find a safe place.
Every Floridian should take this seriously and be aggressive to protect their family. Possessions can be replaced, your family cannot.
Floridians emptied store shelves of water, milk, and bread and waited in long gas lines to fill up their fuel tanks.
Gas is running out everywhere right now, so I'm just a little too late trying to get it, I guess.
The latest storm track shows Irma downgrading to a Category 4 storm, possibly making landfall or skirting by Florida's east coast, and then moving up to the Georgia coast and South Carolina. Irma could cause a great deal of damage, just as Hurricane Harvey did when it flooded parts of Texas. That would mean more disaster relief spending from Washington, where President Trump struck a deal with Democrats Wednesday to raise the government's debt ceiling, a deal that included relief funding to help after Harvey. And as it did before Harvey, OB is busy preparing for potential disaster in Florida. Truckloads of water and food supplies are now being staged at its Ocala, Florida warehouse. And that means Operation Blessing volunteers will be ready to move into action whenever and wherever Hurricane Irma makes landfall. Gary Lane, CBN News.
President Trump has given Congress 6 months to come up with a legislative fix for DACA recipients, and many members are working hard to come up with a solution to meet that deadline. Abigail Robertson brings us more from Washington.
The ball is now in Congress's court when it comes to DACA, after an announcement from Attorney General Jeff Sessions that the administration is ending the Obama-era program that protects hundreds of thousands of young, undocumented immigrants from deportation and provides them with Social Security numbers so that they can go to school and work legally. The administration is giving Congress 6 months to pass a legislative fix before they stop renewing permits. Thousands of DACA recipients like Jose Santoyo are counting on Congress to meet that deadline because their futures in this country are now uncertain.
In social spaces, you're always made to feel like you belong. But it's whenever it comes to applying for jobs, it's whenever it came to applying for scholarships that you realize that some scholarships you weren't going to be eligible for because it required a Social Security number that you didn't have at the time.
When Jose neared high school graduation and was thinking about college, his mother told him he was an undocumented immigrant.
Even though I was getting ready to take the ACT and I was just like the rest of my friends were. And she told me that I wouldn't be able to go to college because I didn't have a Social Security number.
But Jose was able to attend a Texas community college after a church provided him with a scholarship. When DACA took effect, he transferred to Southern Methodist University. In addition to his worries about his own future, Jose has always had another big concern. Who will take care of his younger brother, a full U.S. citizen with cerebral palsy, if their undocumented mother is deported?
He's completely dependent on my mother for everything. He's on a wheelchair. He's not able to walk. He doesn't speak. He's not able to do anything on his own.
Jose says his mother fled Mexico with her sons in 2001 because of the drug cartels. She immediately applied for U.S. citizenship, but due to a paperwork backlog, it could be years before her case is considered.
I think for a lot of DACA recipients, we all have parents that made sacrifices so that we could be DACA recipients. And they too should be considered. Their lives should also be as worthy as ours of being in this country.
President Trump, who has said he will handle the Dreamers with heart, is now counting on Congress to address the situation. Senators Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin hope their bipartisan DREAM Act can provide a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers.
If you worry about these kids, you should vote for the DREAM Act because it gives them what they, I think, deserve, a new life in their home country. Make the case that these kids don't belong here, because I'm going to make the case they do.
Senator Durbin has been fighting for the Dreamers for 16 years, and he hopes that with support from both sides, it will pass this September.
It is time for us in Congress to do the right thing for America, the right thing for these young people and their families, and to pass the DREAM Act, to make it the law of the land, and to do it now.
And in the House, GOP Congressman Carlos Curbelo introduced similar legislation. Curbelo says his bill gained a lot of momentum after President Trump's actions, which he thinks will pressure Congress into solving the issue.
I think this announcement, even though I would have done it a little differently, is giving us the impetus, the urgency in Congress to find a fair solution for them.
Congressmen and senators on both sides of the aisle are hopeful that by the end of this 6-month deadline, they will agree on a more permanent legislative solution for the Dreamers that President Trump will sign into law. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Overseas, Australians begin a nationwide vote on same-sex marriage today. The postal vote involves sending ballots to households throughout the country. The process is expected to take 2 months. The question on the ballot: should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? The postal vote is voluntary and not binding on politicians, but it could lead to greater support in Parliament for legalizing same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage advocates opposed the postal vote, saying it's unnecessary. Traditional marriage supporters say it's important to spark a national debate over the effect that legalizing same-sex marriage will have on freedom of speech and religion. The votes should be tallied by November 15th. South Korea says North Korea will launch another intercontinental ballistic missile Saturday. South Korea's prime minister called the situation grave and says it won't be long before the rogue regime finally has nuclear power. Last weekend, North Korea tested a hydrogen bomb. It triggered a magnitude 6.3 tremor that sent shockwaves to China, South Korea, and Japan. Coming up, just days ago, he prayed for President Trump and the nation in the Oval Office. Today, he tells us about that experience and the president's requests for prayer. Welcome back. Dr. Robert Jeffress is pastor of First Baptist Church in Dallas. He's also a member of President Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board, and last week he prayed with the president in the Oval Office. Earlier, I spoke with Dr. Jeffress about that experience and the role of the board in advising the president. Now, just days ago, you led a prayer in the Oval Office with President Trump. How often do his spiritual advisors pray with the president?
As needed. And a lot of times it would be without cameras being present. But the president wanted to say to the nation that he believed prayer was important, especially in light of what had happened with Hurricane Harvey. But he said to me, Pastor Jeffress, I want our prayer time on Sunday to be more than just about Hurricane Harvey. We certainly want to pray for those victims, but we need to pray for our nation as a whole. And I'm really grateful we have a president who does believe in the power of prayer.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, the president had just issued a proclamation for a national day of prayer for victims of Hurricane Harvey. How did that proclamation come about?
It was completely his idea. He really felt like this was a time for our country to be praying. And many people don't know this side of the president. I've known him for several years now. I can't tell you the number of times I've been with him when he would just spontaneously say, Pastor, would you pray for us? Would you pray for me? One time I was conducting a meeting on his behalf between him and faith leaders in Trump Tower during the campaign. I was going through the agenda. He put his hand on my arm. He said, "Pastor, don't you think we ought to pray?" So the soon-to-be president had to remind the pastor to pray. So I'm grateful again that we have a president who loves Christians, believes in the power of prayer.
Let's talk a little bit more about the role of a spiritual advisor. You say that you're called upon as needed. Do you meet, when you do meet with the president, what goes on? What all is involved with being a spiritual advisor to the president? It sounds kind of heavy.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't use the term spiritual advisor. I think the media has come up with that term. We officially are a part of the White House Faith Initiative. And this is an effort really for us to meet together at the White House, listen to the administration, share their viewpoint, and then solicit our viewpoint on a number of different issues. I mean, people who think we're going into the Oval Office to lead Bible studies probably have the wrong idea of what this is. And this isn't so much our advising the president as it is the president seeking our perspective on a number of issues. And the president respects people of all faith. He has people from the Jewish faith, people who are Muslim and Catholics, but he also recognizes that evangelicals really supported him by the largest margin in history, and he cares about what they think.
So would you say, though, that still the White House and President Trump is giving faith leaders unprecedented access?
Absolutely. I would say, and I've talked to people who were around during the time of Reagan and even George W. Bush, they did not have that kind of access to the president. And, you know, it was interesting. I mentioned that faith meeting I led during the election time, during the campaign time. I asked the members of this in the room, they were leaders of both Catholic and evangelical backgrounds. I said, how many of you were ever invited by Mitt Romney to a meeting like this? Nobody raised their hand. How many of you were invited by George W. Bush? Maybe one or two. I mean, this president is unique in his outreach to evangelical Christians.
Well, I'm sure the evangelical leaders disagree with the president sometimes. DACA might be one example. Do they disagree with the president and speak truth to power when necessary? And if so, how does he receive that?
Well, I never reveal specific conversations with the president, but I can tell you he did solicit input from faith leaders, and I talked with him about it as well. And look, the president is one of the most compassionate people I've ever been around, and he was sincerely torn between his sincere compassion for the DACA recipients and the oath of office he took on January 20th to execute all the laws of the land, not just the ones he agreed with. I think he came up with a perfect solution of delaying the ending of DACA and allowing Congress, the rightful people, to make the laws to fix this problem. Under our system of government, the president doesn't make laws, he executes the laws. It's the Congress who has to legislate, and I hope they'll step up now to the plate and do their constitutional duty.
Well, you have the ear of the president, so how would you advise people at home that are going to see this interview to pray for President Trump?
I think we ought to pray, first of all, for his protection, both physical and spiritual protection for him and his family. I think we ought to pray for wisdom. You know, he sincerely seeks God's wisdom. I don't know if you remember a few months ago when he was standing in front of the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and he tweeted out that picture, and he said at the bottom, "I am praying for God's wisdom." This is a president that really is seeking God's wisdom, and we need to pray that for him as well.
Well, you're also the author of a new book. It is called A Place Called Heaven, 10 Surprising Truths About Your Eternal Home. What is it all about? Give us a summary.
Well, this book, first of all, is a hope-filled book. You know, people would say, well, with all that's going on in the world, hurricanes, international conflict with Korea, political chaos, why should we talk about heaven? Well, that's exactly why we ought to talk about heaven.
People need to know how to get to heaven.
They need to know how to get there. They know there's something better for those who know Christ. But this is also an informational book in which I answer people's 10 most frequently asked questions about heaven. You know, if you knew, Mark, that CBN was going to transfer you to a foreign country in 6 months and it was a permanent move, you'd do everything you could to find out about that country to where you were going so you could prepare adequately. Or if we're Christians, we're going to that place called heaven. This book helps us prepare for it.
Okay, Dr. Robert Jeffress, thank you so much for your time and your energy and insights today. Appreciate it. Up next, babies emerging from the womb and already addicted to heroin. Find out what's being done to stop this drug epidemic when we come back. The nation's opioid addiction is killing tens of thousands of people every year. The CDC estimates 33,000 people died from an opioid overdose in 2015 alone. As Lori Johnson shows us, people are now quickly learning heroin is another deadly drug on the rise in their own backyard.
Caitlin Weems died of a heroin overdose at age 21.
And life has just been so different since. I mean, no one, unless you've been in that situation, can even fathom how that turns your whole world upside down within a second.
Raised in a stable Christian home, Caitlin loved sports and school.
But really, faith is the only thing that gets me through it, because I believe that Caitlin is in heaven. I believe she's not in pain anymore.
If it can happen to Caitlin, it can happen to anyone.
The face of heroin has changed. It used to be a criminal element in the urban city, in a warehouse, nothing around here. Now the face of heroin is my daughter, who loved soccer.
And thousands like her who started the same way.
Caitlin's addiction began innocently and unexpectedly. She first got hooked on prescription painkillers following surgery.
These powerful, often habit-forming narcotics called opioids go by names like Percocet, OxyContin, and Dilaudid.
And then, unfortunately, later on in her story, someone said, why not try heroin? It's the same thing. And within 4 months, she died of a heroin overdose.
Prescription pain pills and heroin produce the same type of high, but heroin is cheaper and easier to get. Another difference? Pain pills are regulated, so you know what you're getting. When it comes to heroin, dealers often secretly lace it with other toxins, like the all-too-common fentanyl, creating a potential deadly blend. Nora Kitchens knows all about that.
When I used heroin the first time, it was just such a euphoric feeling that I felt like that was the feeling that I had been searching for my whole life.
Hooked after that first time, Nora stayed that way for years.
I have a praying mother and father, so there were a lot of times I was in the deep depths of the addiction in very dark places that I know I only came out of because of that.
Heroin addicts continually need more of it to get the same high. Nora wound up with a $100 a day habit.
Well, that's where the criminal activity starts taking place. I've been to prison 3 times, actually, because of what this drug has done.
As the number of addicts skyrockets, so does the number of babies born to them, who, when they come into the world, are actually addicts themselves and must immediately endure painful withdrawal.
This happens almost every day here at Virginia's Centera Norfolk General Hospital. The day we visited, maternity nurses helped deliver 5.
They're agitated, they're overstimulated, they're difficult to calm. You may have where they have a poor sleep-wake cycle. They may not be able to tolerate changes in the environment. They often are very, very unconsolable is probably the best way to describe it.
Weaning them off the drug often takes weeks.
Most of the time, the babies still go home with mom with a plan in place for follow-up and to make sure that everyone's getting treatment like they're supposed to. They care about their babies, they're moms, they're professional women, they're our friends, and they're our co-workers, and they're our church members.
Like Nora, whose son William was born addicted.
I found out I was pregnant and I was strung out on heroin. And I went to the doctor and said, Doc, I am strung out on heroin and I'm pregnant and I want to have this baby. What do we do?
William is clean and healthy. Nora is still in recovery.
What it took for me was falling down on my knees in front of God and telling him how broken I was and to please come take this from me.
Meanwhile, lawmakers are doing what they can. Virginia Delegate Todd Gilbert pushed through legislation allowing law enforcement to administer the so-called save shot to overdose victims.
Unless we can nip it in the bud, unless we can get ahead of the problem, we are left only with the option of trying to save their lives should they, police officers find them in crisis.
Most states are following this lead, with some allowing trained citizens to administer the save shot, also known as naloxone or Narcan. There is also the 911 Good Samaritan law, allowing people present during an overdose to call for help without risking arrest, all in an effort to loosen heroin's grip on our country.
This is a dangerous and highly addictive substance that even teenagers are intravenously injecting into their bodies. And that is a horrific thought, and it's a horrific reality that we're facing. And if we don't get a handle on it, the future looks very bleak in this country for our children and their future.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
A serious, serious problem. People need to get the help that they need, and people definitely need to be praying. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Pope Francis is in Colombia. During his visit, he'll be met with an unusual song and dance.
Te recibe con los brazos abiertos. A una sola voz te decimos muy contentos. Bendito sea Dios que en su sabiduría te ha traído a nuestras tierras para ser su guía.
Sister Maria Valentina will rap the official hymn to welcome the Pope before thousands of people. The sneaker-wearing, bar-spitting nun is part of a Los Angeles-based Catholic musical group. They were selected from a contest that drew more than 400 musical acts, all vying to sing for the Pope. And it'll be Sister Maria Valentina. Good for her. Well, that's it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Have a great day.